Before using PowerShell to deploy and manage virtual machines in Azure, I need to install the Azure PowerShell module on my workstation. The best way to install the Azure PowerShell module is to do it from the PowerShell gallery, which is what I'm going to demonstrate in this lecture, starting with the installation of PowerShell Get. Now, I need to start with the installation of PowerShell Get because PowerShell Get is the tool that is used to pull down PowerShell modules from the gallery. So before I do anything, I need to ensure that I have the latest version of the PowerShell Get module installed on my workstation. To check what version of PowerShell Get I have, and to even confirm it's installed, I need to run the get module command, which what I'll do here is demonstrate by running it in my PowerShell session. As you can see here, I have my PowerShell session opened. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the get module command to list what versions of PowerShell Get are currently available on my workstation. Now what I'm going to do is pipe the results of the get module command to the select object command. By doing that, it will allow me to view just the information I'm looking for. In this case, I just want to see the name, the version, and the path of each instance of PowerShell Get that currently resides on my machine. So what I'm going to do here is hit enter. And as you can see, running the get module command tells me what version of PowerShell Get I currently have installed. Now to perform the exercises in this course, I'm going to need PowerShell Get version 1.1.2.0 or later. If I didn't have that version, I'd need to update by running the install module command, which I'll demonstrate in a few moments. But as you can see here, I do have the latest version of PowerShell Get. I'm at 1.6. Since this is a later version of 1.1.2.0, we're good to go. But in the interest of demonstrating the install module command, I'll run that here as well, just so you can see. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the install module, and I'm going to install PowerShell Get, and the force switch here simply suppresses any of the confirmation prompts I would normally receive. So hitting enter here runs the command and installs the latest version of PowerShell Get on my machine. So as you can see, the actual installation is rather uneventful. Now your machine may be a little bit different. If you don't have PowerShell 1.6, it may install some additional modules and components, but nonetheless the install is usually uneventful, to say the least. So now that I have the latest version of PowerShell Get installed, I can now go ahead and actually install the Azure PowerShell module. Before using the PowerShell Get functionality to download the Azure PowerShell module from the gallery, I first must configure my PowerShell session here with an execution policy that allows scripts. Since the default policy on Windows within PowerShell is restricted, I have to change it by running the set execution policy command. So what I'm going to do is copy this over here. Now on the screen, you'll see that I'm going to run the set execution policy command here. What I'm going to do here is set it to remote signed by using the execution policy switch. Now this is something I only have to do once on my machine. I don't have to do this every single time. Now what I could do is set my policy to what's called unrestricted instead of remote signed. And to be honest, sometimes I do that depending on what I'm trying to do. That said, when you set the policy to unrestricted, that would mean that you're opening yourself up to unsigned commands that could be malicious. So when I can, I try to avoid using unrestricted. In this case, remote signed works for what I need to do here. So I'll go ahead and hit enter here to set my policy change. And here it's just warning me, telling me, yes, the execution policy protects you from scripts that you do not trust, yada, yada, yada. It's exposing you to security risks. Yes, we want to go ahead and confirm the policy change. So now we have our execution policy set to remote signed. And as such, I can go ahead and install the Azure RM module from the gallery running the install module command. As you can see on your screen, I'm going to use the install module command to install the Azure RM module. I'm going to do that by specifying the name switch and referencing Azure RM. The allow clobber switch ensures that I get the full and complete installation of Azure RM. After hitting enter here, the installation begins. Now, for whatever reason, the PowerShell gallery is not configured as a trusted repository for PowerShell Get. As such, you're likely to see the warning that you see here on the screen right now. And what it's doing is it's essentially telling me, hey, you're installing these modules from a repository that we don't trust. If you're sure this repository is good, go ahead and change the installation policy value. Selecting yes is going to allow the installation of the Azure PowerShell module to continue. So we'll go ahead and hit yes and hit enter. The installation itself is generally painless. Now, the Azure RM module that gets installed is essentially a roll-up module for the Azure Resource Manager commandlets. Installing the Azure RM module also pulls down from the gallery any other Azure PowerShell module not previously installed. Now, what I can do to confirm that my Azure RM is actually installed here, since it really doesn't give you a whole lot of feedback, is I can run the get module command that I ran earlier to check for PowerShell Get, but instead I just specify Azure RM. So I'm going to run the get module command using the name switch, calling out Azure RM. I'm going to list any available that are installed, and I'm going to select name, version, and path. And as you can see here, when I hit enter, it returns Azure RM 5.7 and gives me the path to the installation. So like I said, the installation process is fairly painless. So now that I've installed Azure PowerShell, I can load the Azure PowerShell module into my PowerShell session here. And to do that, I'm going to use what's called the import module command. So let me go ahead and copy the import module command into my session here, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So as you can see, the command is rather simple. It's an import module command, and I'm just simply specifying the Azure RM using the name switch. Now, what this import module command does is pull that module into my active session here, so the commandlets that are part of the Azure RM module become available to me to perform management tasks. Now, if I fail to do this, later on when I go in and try to manage my VMs using Azure-specific commands within PowerShell, they're going to fail. It'll come back and tell me, hey, this command isn't available to you. That's because we hadn't imported the module. So doing this makes all that stuff available to me. So to import the module, we simply hit enter. And as you can see on the screen here, the process is rather uneventful, like most of the other processes have been in setting this stuff up. Now, unless you see an error displayed here, you can be sure that the Azure PowerShell module is loaded and ready to go. And so now that I actually have the Azure PowerShell module installed and loaded into my session, I'll hop over into the next lecture where I can explain how to actually connect to Azure using the PowerShell module that we've installed. Now, in this lecture, we're actually going to connect to our Azure Tenant through PowerShell. Now, although Azure PowerShell supports multiple different login methods, the easiest way to get logged in is to do so interactively at the command line using the Connect Azure RM account command. It's a simple command to run, and what I'm going to do here is demonstrate how to do that. So let me copy the command over from my notepad. And by the way, I'll include a zip file within the course that includes all of these commands in a nice little text file that you can reference later on. So I'll paste this command into my PowerShell session here, and it's a simple connect-azure RM account. After hitting enter, I'm prompted with a dialog box that's asking me for my Azure admin credentials. All I need to do here is simply supply my Azure credentials, and from there, I get connected to my tenant. So let me go ahead and type in my admin credentials here. And I'll go ahead and click next and supply my password and sign in. And the first indication that I've actually gotten connected is it comes back with my tenant information. Now, another way to confirm is to run the get Azure RM subscription command, which I'm copying from my notepad here and we'll paste in. So here you can run the get Azure RM subscription and hit enter. And basically what it does is return exactly what was returned up here when I signed in originally. As you can see, I'm using my pay-as-you-go subscription for this lab. So now that I'm connected to my Azure tenant, let's move on where I can actually begin provisioning resources inside of Azure using PowerShell.